Hey everybody, this is your good friend Dr. David P. Proden, the safety doc, running a mic check and a little studio equipment check tonight because I will be the guest tomorrow evening on the Three Beards podcast. And it's been a while since I've used the Shure microphone and not the headset. So just wanting to check that things are running here and things are looking okay. So I'm going to. So I can see that my background is flipped, so it's the Kentucky Batman. So yeah. Um, so my main concern tomorrow is that I can hear the people when I'm on the show, like I can hear them through the headphones because I'll be a guest on their show and had an issue with that um, a while ago, and so I'm not good. I'm not sure. So down here in the studio, since I don't really do the podcast anymore, any professional interactions I have, which is many with the consulting, probably 40, 50 meetings a week, is all done through my headset through so I can move around, right? And but I typically don't like to use that um for podcasts or if I'm a guest somewhere, I like to give them better audio. So sounds good. Well, thank you, Ron Wayne. So I'm going to try to flip my background here because on the side monitor. It's coming up as reversed. So let me see. Mirror my camera. There we go. That should look good. Um, so hey, now we have things fixed. So I would turn the sign on, but I would probably forget to turn it off tonight. So I'll make sure though I've got it on tomorrow. So I'm not really centered here either. So I need to go in and do a few adjustments. Thankfully, with my camera, I can center myself and do stuff like that. But I don't want to. Am I still? Um, okay, so Ron is the safety doc. Is all of that? Um, is Can you read that or is it reversed? Because it looks to me like things are still reversed. Ah, so, which is strange. Yeah, this still reversed in the back. So, well, that's useless. So here it says mirror my background. Apparently not. Um, all right, there's another way to get at this, um, and that's to go right into here. Um, Flip horizontally. Let's see if that works. All right, did we just flip horizontally? So here's a little marker. Yeah, it did. So that that's good. So yeah. The weird thing is when I have, so I got to make sure I go back in and undo that. Um, so it's the default setting on, whether I'm using um, proprietary, platforms or what it is. But so I typically don't mess with it, right? Because I'm using the HyperX headset, and so yeah, the biggest thing here is I want to be able to I can hear myself through the headphones, so that is a good sign. I don't have any lighting on and right anything going on right now. So, but the mic isn't monitor. The mic's not doing monitoring, meaning let me check the mic setting here. So I just did an update, a hard, a firmware update, and so it's there. But what is going on here? The mic. Yeah, this all looks good. So what should be happening is I should be seeing lights on the mic, monitoring lights, and I don't, although apparently the mic sounds good. But let me open up the mic again. Hmm. All right. So it sounds good. It's Misty Mrs. Wayne. Um, auto level. Is this all right? Now it's to auto level. Fuck, I can hear the change. Yeah, live meters. There we go on the mic. Okay. So that's good. You should have noticed a change right now in the audio. It should have gotten louder and kind of a little more expansive. Um, you might be getting just a ton of background. So um, does this sound a little better? Because to me now it's coming through louder, and I can check on my um, the mic, the lights. The LED lights are popping up here. So before they were static. But this to me, this sounds pretty good. Yeah, zippy. um, okay, don't hear background, so good. I hear a little bit, but I think I've got this. I don't know, I've got the. Oh my god, I've got it up kind of high. So, um, yeah, so that's kind of what's happening. Is I haven't used this mic um, since April. I think I used it when I was finishing up my spring university class, and in the fall, I did not do um, the new recording of intros and stuff of how to access class because it really didn't change. So I just said, watch the previous video. I mean, it was pretty much all the same stuff. Um, but this spring, I'll be, I, I don't know. I've really, the headset's nice, the HyperX, and it works really great for what I need it for. It's a gamer headset, especially when I have coffee and have a meeting, quick take a sip of coffee. So, but yeah, I think my background looks pretty good right now. So why don't we fire up the sign? I have to redo some of the settings here, but I think that's static. Wait a second here. I don't know. See, I love the sign, right? So there we go. Um, but I have to update the settings, but I kind of wanted to do what it's doing now. It's doing just two colors. No. All right, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, why don't we do this? It has been a while since I've been doing studio, and voice is nice and strong. It's good. So I know the mic works, and I don't have any meetings tomorrow. Nobody's working on a Wednesday. Um, so I mean, I have no consulting scheduled tomorrow, so which is nice. It's a break. It's been really a crazy fall. So those of you who, yeah, that's a beautiful sign. I mean, Coop, gifted that to me, and it looks great from your angle, but from down in the studio, the sign depth is like 4 inches, and so you kind of get this effect of the different layers of the orange being, closer to the back and yellow being more pronounced. And I mean, like I'm the only one down here, right? It's studio in my basement, but um, it is really impressive to just see it in person because of the three-dimensional aspect of the sign. But it's very cool. It's very cool. And so let me give you guys a little bit of an update. So I appreciate all of you, and I'm going to kind of talk through what tomorrow's show is going to be. I'll be a guest on the Three Beards podcast. I know I'm not centered here. I'm not going to kind of mess with anything with that until tomorrow. Uh, we've got a little bit of audio video check before then, and I can center myself and do all of that pretty fast. So good to see you, Vanessa. Good to see you, Ron, Zippy. Um, so yeah, let me bring up the show notes. So of course, me being me, I had to put together a page of notes for myself um, for tomorrow's show, just to make sure I'm giving full value as a guest on the Three Beards podcast. Chris Harmon, Otson Burke, Craig Ansel, and Brian Bowden. So Three Beards podcast. You can check in the community tab. I post it today a link to it. So it's at 7 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. I feel like I need the mic closer to me, but actually I have it in a far setting right now, so it's fine right where it is. Um, but again, I'm not used to using the mic. I'm used to using the the headset. But so yeah, that's been that's been a while. Kind of in the works of putting that together. And one of the things was with the consulting, it was very difficult to be on a show and have and speak for a couple hours right after I've done a whole day of consulting. Um, and because I'm talking, pretty much all of that time. So then you need at night you need your voice to recover. And actually, I mean, like most nights, honestly, like 8:30, I'm hit the hay. I'm in bed. Um, so I have to be pretty careful with my voice because it's hard to bounce back. And when I was teaching, so every fall I teach um, a pair of university graduate courses in person, and then every spring is an online uh, course in the program. And I'm actually next year, like 2025, probably adding a second class in spring. But the fall classes, involve where I'm getting up at 3:30 in the morning, driving to the university, and then getting things set up because um, this year was a little bit different. A few students were not able to participate in person. The class is all in person on weekends. So like most of my Saturdays, I was 120 miles away. Um, and while it's terrific, it really was pretty draining, to do the drive, get over there, and then get stuff set up remotely. I had large classes, just so the number of students you're interacting with, there's this multiplier, right, with grading papers and with putting together assignments. And I kind of rebuilt the one class, and I'm glad I did because I came up with some really kind of innovative new activities. So it's my 20th year. Well, actually, now I'm past my 20th year, so I'm starting into my 21st year. But as a university prof, so I don't know. I just got an email from my cell phone provider. Hey, do you want to upgrade? Like they've been hitting that pretty hard lately. No, I'm good. Um, but it hit me, and I think it was combined. One was I started consulting earlier this fall. So normally I don't consult. I don't, I sign contracts and work. It's mostly in the educational sector, but um, I had never started until September. I always had my summers, just for me and biking and stuff like that, and I agreed to start in mid August, right? So that's when people want you to help them plan and professional development. And I get it, like, right. So I did that, but it really shortened up my summer. And I also realized it was very difficult to prepare the university classes, especially they were larger enrollments, while I was consulting, right? So um, I would book Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays are full consulting. Um, and then Wednesdays would be a day where I would kind of be working on stuff on my own. Um, but so, like, if you're consulting on a Friday, for 7 hours, and then you have to prep for class on Saturday, and you're getting up at 3:30, you don't really sleep, right? And I love the class stuff. It's just like the drive and being on your feet for an entire Saturday and stuff. It was really draining. Like I felt it like I'd never have felt before, like this fall. Um, to be honest, like today is probably the first time what are we at here? The 21st. So 2 weeks ago was my birthday, by the way. So, not much of a celebration on that day. I mean, um, but um, but anyway, yeah, going back to so it would have been easily like 3 months ago. I was already kind of in full swing, and um, so and it was just it was weird to start that early. And then the university stuff is so when teaching at the university, you're building out the in-person stuff. And while there's some of that that's static, I teach legal issue classes for superintendents and then aspiring special education directors. And a lot of stuff also changed, like funding and legal things. so so I'm updating and I'm being having to be very contemporary. Um, so there was more work that needed to go into getting materials ready, and there were some things that I wanted to do differently in classes, and kind of more small group activities. One thing I added in the superintendent class last year's a trial, and I thought it went really well. Was I I looked at legislation that was up in our state or at a national level, but mostly at the state level, and then I would find education related legislation. For example, Narcan in schools, right? That there'd be public hearings, and should there be a law that there should be, that. So it's Ron Wayne wishing me a happy birthday. So appreciate it. I was back on November 7th, week after Halloween. So, um, um, so God, where was I with this? So anyway, one of the things in looking at that superintendent class, and I get to work with some really great people in there. Like these, these are like, wow. Um, so, and I wanted to change that class to be more advocacy because sitting down the first couple hours with people, it's like a few things. I want you to understand the resources available to you, and you probably are subscribed and pay memberships to things that you don't even use. You're just not aware of it because things get busy. Um, but then, largely what needs to separate you from everybody else, like you taking this class, right? What the edge is you're an advocate, right? So if it is school funding, if it's Narcan in schools, if it's, you know, I, I we could go on and on, but one of the things is we had some phonics legislation, we had a bill that would require schools to have a um, piece of medical equipment in case kids were choking, so that would need to be kept and trained. So anyway, we go into actual real things that are being considered, and then I write down how to give testimony because I've done that at a state level. So it's a pretty easy format. There's like 4 steps. You introduce who you are, and then we do 4 minutes. So I bring out the timer and I always have it count up because I don't want someone in mid sentence and it beeps because typically when you testify at the state, they don't do that. They'll just kind of like let you know your time is up and then you wrap it up. But so that was really good last year. First time I did that because I said, you gotta advocate. I've been on PBS and not to toot my own horn, but when I am in front of people, I'm like, I've got a pretty robust Google Scholar page. I've written a lot of stuff. I've worked on the abeyance agreement, legal note I contributed to that. Rachel Cox did an amazing job putting that together, but I contributed some early discussion in a Kaplan article. Nothing near what Rachel did, but you need to do these things, right? And and people don't think about that. So that's where you basically draw kind of out of a hat. I have a lot of activities like that. It's the hand of fate. And so, whatever you get like 20 minutes to prepare for it. I don't expect you to know a lot about it, right? You're going to research a little bit on the web, but you have to present your name, what the issue is, and then a fact or a story that's related to it that is a firsthand experience. And then like you have to conclude with like saying again, like, I am for this proposed bill or I'm against it. And um, so I built that out this year. But the thing is, like, you can't build it out ahead of time because you don't know the legislation until the class, right? So some of the stuff was like proposed a week before class started. Um, and I had really good feedback from the soups this year. I had every single one do it. They picked, and I thought that was pretty awesome. That's a great activity. I never did that when I was in my administrative courses, and I wish somebody would have done that. So that turned out really well. So again, building that out, and then I kind of redesigned some things in the course. I cut back on case studies. There was a time when we did a lot of case studies, and I built all of them, and they were pretty cool. And now I've pretty much cut back to 2 case studies, and we just kind of have moved away from that and into more of like people presenting in this advocacy side, which I like. So it was that. And then again, I had that larger class, and then I'm grading papers too. So I've got a stack of papers, and so like a Friday night, I'm telling people, if you could submit your stuff ahead of time, that'd be great. But people would submit their stuff 7 o'clock or at a Friday night, and I'm getting up 3:30 the next morning for class. So some of the stuff I wasn't able to grade because I said, by the time, if it's after 7 p.m. on a Friday, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to change the due dates and next year move things up, maybe 1 or 2 days. But I mean, otherwise everything was good. It was just like, it would wipe out a weekend. And then, when you're doing that for 2 classes and multiple weekends, and, I had 11 cords of firewood, that I had to haul from my garage to the basement stack. That took up another weekend. And I think I spent 12 or 14 hours doing that over a weekend, split across 2 days. And, because I heat the house with wood. So, and then, outside the leaves fall, right? I mean, just stuff that just has to be taken care of. But everything's pretty good. We got the Christmas lights out today. I got some stuff out, and wife did the um like lights on the landscaping and stuff like that. And I got out the deer, and then we wired everything up this afternoon. So all that's going. So now things are pretty smooth. We don't really have a whole lot going on over Thanksgiving. We won't be traveling this year, so that is kind of a plus too. So I'm pretty happy because I feel like I'm caught up. So that's a good feeling. And it was, like I said, it was tough. It was professionally tough to be for the fall. I had to come up with a completely new way to manage my time. So what I was doing was, in addition to my calendar, and then I have multiple calendars, and certain people have access to calendars, right? Like, but there's, the other thing is like, there's all the contracted services, right, are all specific times and cost and whatever. But yeah, I had to go in and build an additional calendar just for myself as a shared, as a Google Doc, just I had access to, and it would be every week, like what I had, and then what I had to start preparing for, like things for a meeting December 4th or December 11th, and how I had to start preparing for it now, and then how to, follow up with people. And so it was this really, overwhelming kind of sense. And plus, like, it's just, living in Wisconsin and we've really had, I mean, it was like in the 60s last week, and today it was like 50. So we haven't had a stretch of cold weather yet. So this will be like a shorter winter, because even if it gets in this following week, it's not going to probably drop below 30, but you expect December, January, February, March to be cold. And if you can kind of get a nice November where you don't have snow and cold, that's a bonus, and which we've had. But I also like I had some days I could have biked, which kind of was a downer because I put the bike away. I winterized it um, the end of September because normally I don't ride after that, but there were a number of days that I could have ridden, where it was like 70 and sunny in October, and so it's one of those things, right? You've got to kind of figure things out, but and it's probably getting old, right? I am definitely that's part of it. I sat down, and not that I eat bad or poorly, but um, one of the things too is I changed up my diet just recently. So let me know what you guys think about this. But I added, so I was doing a large bowl of shredded wheat and almond milk, just because I don't regular milk. I'm not a big the lactose. I don't know. The older I get, so it's almond milk for cereal, and the rest of the time I'm usually like it's water, tea. But so here's what I would do that, and I always did a green apple because I always like a green apple to start off the morning. And I realized, you know what? I think I'm also not getting the calories that I need to get. So um, I started to just in the last week add a hard boiled egg, and then a banana and a small wheel of cheese. And just to get in more calories and kind of some more slow burn stuff. And then I always have a big coffee. So I leave early in the morning, and we have Quick Trip, a gas station that's, third of a mile from my house. So I go there and I get a big coffee for $2.10 every single morning. And it's a good way also to kind of get out of the house, and it's a good routine. Um, so I've got my my coffee, but I was like, I'm running. I need to go with more calories, and I need to go with a little bit of a mix here of. So I think that's been a plus too. So um, yeah, so I need to bring in more protein. So I bought. I usually eat peanuts, but not in the morning. So I got some cashews to kind of munch on, which I like, and some almonds. So but and I don't want to go too much processed, zippy. So um, I do intend to get whey protein from a cheese factory that's not too far away. That they sell it, but you have to go there. They don't ship it. You got to call ahead to see if it's like in stock. But like it's 100-year-old cheese factory. They've been selling straight up whey for years. And when I back in like 2013 through maybe 2016, when I was like very very fit and biking, lifting, and I also started to kind of lift weights again. But um, always had whey protein, and it was awesome. Like I could notice the difference, more energy and just physically stronger, um, and even my doc was like, yeah, it's a good thing, right? Um, to to use that. So I'm going to go back and make a trip and load up on some whey, and I like it. So just mix it in with a glass of almond milk, right? So that was part of it. And then, yeah, I mean, for the first time, I was just going to bed early to just be worn out. But anyway, you're like, oh my God, right? So, uh, yes, I have started. So the title of this one is a press conference, 1 in 10 in fantasy football. And I am 1 in 10 right now. I mean, I won one game and I've lost 10. I'm 4 games out of ninth place. I'm eliminated from the playoffs, and I I've been in this league for over 20 years. So, guys after college kind of put this league together. So like I've known these guys a lot of are from my hometown, and I've had bad years. I've never had a year where I've been 1 in 10. Um, but I think part of it too is like, while I could keep my roster, like you make sure you're starting people during a bye week, you change it out so you're starting people. I wasn't like maintaining my roster just with basically like 15 minutes a week. That might have picked up another couple wins, but yeah, some 1 in 10. Wow. As I think 2 years ago, I won the league, and then last year I came in second, although I had, like, the most points, but it's a pretty dismal showing. Um, so yeah, Zippy actually so I do protein bars, and actually in back of me in the cabinet, I've got, a number of protein bars, and I use them when I bike. Um, so yeah, I can't even tell you which kind I use, but there's a specific protein bar I use when I bike. And biking is a whole different, whole different thing of how you put together your diet and ahead of time and all of that. And um, but yeah, I realized I was burning through just a lot of calories. And it was very sedentary, when you're consulting, right? And I've got all my stuff down here, and um, so you're just spending a lot of time sitting. So it is, um, yeah. So anyway, it is. It is. I'm glad the fall is done. It was a crazy fall. So and yeah, I kind of vanished. I had disconnected for a while. I've maintained a little bit of a Twitter presence. LinkedIn, I was going to shut that down, but I've kept it because I do find um, some interesting, you know, posts in the community there for my university stuff. School safety stuff is good. I don't pay for it. I don't have the paid version of LinkedIn, so it's not like I do much, but I'll put some stuff over there once in a while. But I want to share the velocity of information. So let me bring out the book. Oh, right here, right. Um, the audiobook is on sale for 9.99. I put it on sale at Spotify or Barnes and Noble. Um, so the audiobook narrated by Ben Hawk, actor Ben Hawk, 6 hours, 40 minutes, professionally done, really, really good. And you get a very robust companion document that I put together. So every diagram I think is in there. And, so it's really a good value. So 9.99, and that's through the end of the month. So it's kind of crazy with audiobooks also, and the paperback, the publisher sets the price. So there's nothing I can do on that. But the audiobooks. So if you go to so Spotify is my distributor. I own the rights, so I'm technically the publisher of the audiobook. But so they distribute all over the place, right? So libraries and Nook and Chirp and Barnes and Noble and you know Audible. So when these places market your book, your audiobook, they can put whatever price they want on it. So even though I've listed like here's what it is for um, you know, a retailer, here's what it is for a library, they can put it higher or put it lower. It's this weird thing of how audiobooks are priced. So, typically, Audible, I think right now it's like $5 or $6, but you have to have a membership or a trial. But then otherwise, it's usually like $17, even though like I've priced it at like 14. So, um, so it's weird. So if you're looking for audiobooks, shop around like downpour.com. Is good. You could just get the MP3 file too. But right now, if you go into Spotify, between now and the end of the month, or Barnes and Noble, you can get the Velocity of Information whole audio, the entire audiobook for $9.99. So it's interesting too, like how your royalties are paid and show up on audiobook. And it's been a good learning experience, and but it's real quirky how that works, because there's a certain time when audiobooks can be returned, and then what that refund process looks and what it looks like when you actually get royalties. And it's strange. So with the books in their other formats, I get a royalty one time a year in like first week of July. So, but with audiobooks, you get a royalty typically monthly, but it's not like every it's not always the first week. It might be like the third week, or it might be kind of moves around. It's when they go in and they process everything. So um, a couple people have asked. So let me check over here. So Zippy's saying he's sleeping like he's not sleeping good. Oh, come on, buddy. You gotta be sleeping good. It could be all the consulting is lagging your body. Yeah, um I did, and I shared with people, kind of I said this fall was the absolute worst professional fall I ever had. Like fall season. When I say worst, not in quality of product, right? Or that it's just like it was so much work so fast. And then with the big classes to spin all of this stuff together, there wasn't the time in the day. I'd be like, okay, here's the block on Wednesday night or Friday. And I would get tired too. So I knew by like 8:30 I had to be getting to bed. Um, and so it was this thing where I was just like I was basically kind of looking to this week, and that's when to this interview with Three Beards, which I'll do tomorrow, Three Beards podcast. I'm looking forward to that. We had been talking about that for a few months, and I just said, um, let's look down the road on the calendar, and I looked. I'm like, this will work. When they said the 22nd of November, I'm like, yeah, that works really well for me. So cool. Yeah. So I would appreciate, if you're interested in the audiobook or you want to share it out. It is really, again, it's exceptionally well done. There's 12 interviews, so it's engaging. And I get this: the velocity of information was recently cited in an article, a research article in the Journal of Volcanology. So the journal that studies volcanoes. Some researchers were studying the specific volcano event and why people left or didn't leave. And within that, they cite it back to my book, which is interesting because my book technically, it's easier to find journal articles than it is to find. I mean, someone must have had the book and said, "Here's stuff that seems like it's relevant to what we're researching." I don't know how that process worked, but I was like, "Wow, the Journal of Volcanology." I would have never thought that was where the velocity of information would be cited. But yeah, I did that section with Pigeon Forge Fire in Tennessee, and just numerous times in there where things were kind of Chernobyl and Nikolai Razovayu and the interview, things kind of starting to go bad. And Randy, or I was going to say Randy Travis, although Randy Travis is a singer. So but yes, our crab boating friend, I want to say Randy Travis, but that's not. Excuse me, I should know that. So, well, trying to look through a 200-page book and find the. But anyway, we were, so that was pretty crazy. But so yeah, so what's cool with Google Scholar, all of my published works are there, including a lot of journal articles, which and then they get cited by other researchers, and it shows up on Google Scholar, and usually like there's much more that's cited out there. It's just Google Scholar hasn't caught it. But the higher your ranking is, it's a plus for you at the university and then just professionally, which is good. Although like in those realms, I'm kind of pretty pretty static. Like I'm not applying for a new university position or looking to do anything kind of expanded at the university. I said I might teach one additional class in the spring of 2025 that I get to build, so that'd be pretty cool. But so it's one of those things which is more. Um, it's just kind of fun to see who cites the work and how they use it. So as I as I as I tell people, I said, I look really good in an internet search until you get to like page 8. But so but a lot of this stuff, shows up. So it's Misty Mrs. Wayne. Yeah, it is cool to have that cited. So there's a lot of my work. Well, now some of my work's been cited numerous times, I guess is what I should say, through Google Scholar. It's pretty cool. Although, like, people haven't contacted me. So that was one thing when I was doing my PhD. I remember my advisor. So I was citing like all these people, and it was, about school safety and other decision making stuff. And he said to me, "Well, why don't you just email or call like this person at the University of Michigan or whatever university where they were doing this research?" And I was like, "Whoa, I never thought of that." And that worked really well. I think I only had one person who wasn't very receptive to that. Otherwise, people are like, "Oh, yeah. So you're reading the study I published, 5 years ago about whatever. What are your questions?" Um, so yeah, so I'm and yeah, I felt at the university level, um, I had some really good steps, good changes I made this year in the course format, and I'm going to be making more changes into that self advocacy part because, like if you're coming in as a superintendent, like you've got people to help you with budget. You just have to know not to spend money, in careless ways, not to encumber, funds. But everyone's facing the same issues, right? Like as far as in my state, there's a structural $1 billion gap between special education funding and the amount of cost with special education, which results in districts having to use fund balance or other dollars to pay for these special education costs that aren't paid for by the Fed or the state, which they should be legally because the legislation had said that. But anyway, so like you're not going to change that or how much money you're getting off of to run a school, right? So when you dig into these budget things, and how much you're able to pay staff and stuff, you gotta just, you have to have a good sense of being a good steward of dollars and the resources that you have available, to you. And again, I think it's more, and I talked with the soups, it's working, you can collaborate more with other districts around you. And there are some really cool things you can do, like 3D additive printing labs, really aren't that expensive, to put together in a school district, relatively speaking. And some extracurriculars like esports, which for a couple $1,000 you can get up and running, and so there's a lot you can do. But we have 421 districts, and is that a model that's outdated? Um, so And we started to talk this fall, and I had to be measured on how I presented it, but we talked about, um, so I did a deep fake um, case study, which was authentic. There was a principal in the state of New York in March, and high school students made a deep fake of him saying threatening comments. So he didn't say this, but this video's out there. It's all pro Lemonton. Hey, buddy, biking. Yes, won't be. I just as a quick aside. I didn't do 100-mile ride last year. I think it's been 2 years since I did a 100-mile ride. I did, I think I did one or two 70-mile rides. Most of my rides are like 40 or 50 miles, which is still a good ride. But there's a completely different mindset and a different approach to doing a 100-mile ride. Like, like you actually drive out and you put your stash of things out on the trail, not a trail, but alongside the road, and certain places, and so you could, you've got food and water or Gatorade or whatever it is. So you do a whole lot of prep. And I was like, God, it's been a couple of years and I need to set a goal. And the goal is to do a 100-mile ride in 2024, to go back and to do, I was thinking like 110, but there's also like there's a realism of, there's not a lot of people just in general, long distance cyclists who bike over 100 miles. Like if that's all you do, you're like a professional long distance cyclist, like, I think 120, 130 is kind of the tops. And we're talking, dudes that have like a $5,000 or $10,000 bike and training all year long. So, but I would like to touch the century mark again to do a 100-mile ride. So it's kind of my goal. So that's been good. So, yeah, so I was talking to something with university classes just a second ago. So what was it? Oh, we were talking about deep fakes, and this guy in New York, his principal, students did the deep fake, and basically what it resulted in him losing his job, possibly his career, had this been authentic. And the students confessed that it was a deep fake. But in class, we talked about, well, what happens if this does, you receive this as an administrator, another of a staff member, of a student, right? A student could be vaping, or maybe they're making a threat of harm to self or others, or, so you can create these things with, I wouldn't say relative ease, but kind of, right? So pretty easy. It's pretty easy to do that. And 421 districts, small districts, big districts. So what we found out, nobody had a policy. So we're all looking into, say, look for your district policy and how to investigate deepfakes or protocols. Nobody had anything. So then, we talked through, how would you handle this? Would you suspend the person while you're investigating? So let's say it's a principal, like in this actual case that happened in New York. It's real. So do you suspend that principal while you're investigating this deepfake? And how are you, like, who's looking at this video? I mean, so one thing you learn pretty fast is nobody has a policy. Like, I don't know if I would suspend him, or do you investigate and keep that principal on site while you're investigating, which could take a week or days or weeks. I don't know. Or also, like, we brought up the possibility, do you immediately call 911 if you see a video and this principal is making threats against the school right in this video and someone gives it to you? So, we know video is king, and especially in the way that the judicial system and law enforcement, looks at evidence. So, right, if you have a dash cam video and, something happens, that trumps your, testimony and eyewitness and stuff like that. So all pros saying it's as bad as swatting. See that? You're right on. And that's where I was going with that discussion with these, new school leaders. I said, your organizations, when you go to conferences and they're sending you your newsletters and your updates, I said, this is real. And they're not telling you, they're not giving you guidance. The Department of Justice in the state, has a tip line and some other stuff for school safety. I'm like, what they should be doing right now is creating a portal so you can upload, I guess. I don't even know how this would work, but so let's say it's an alleged deepfake video, and you could upload this, video, and then their software can analyze it and say, yeah, there's a 90% chance it's authentic, or a 50%. I mean, who knows? But to expect all 421 districts to do this on their own, so you're going to have vendors come in. So then I got to play the role of a vendor. So I made up my own PowerPoint presentation, 10 slides, and I gave a little presentation. I was a vendor. I made up a company, and I was saying, everything a vendor would probably say, right? I have X intelligence agency experience, right? And I work for a company. We have proprietary software, and we can analyze your video, and within 5 minutes you'll get a response. You'll get a confidence level of like 50-50 on this. Yes, it could be a fake. No, 90% that it's a fake, or 90% it's true. Like no one will go 100% for liability, right? There'll always be, it's use personal professional discretion, and other resources available to you, such as interviewing. Um, so at least if you had this centralized at a state level and trainings on it, you could have, um, or even a federal level, but let's just say a state level, Department of Justice, you could have some system that this went through. Um, and it's not only going to affect schools, right? It's going to pretty much, you could consider any workplace, just any setting, court hearings, custodial hearings, divorces, things like that. All those deepfake video stuff will start to pour into pretty fast. Um, so it is really crazy. So I played the role of vendor, and then I pitched it, and I had slides and graphics of all the stuff, which was pretty interesting to do. And then, and then afterwards we talked, and I'm saying, so what do you do if your district is, would you say yes to the product that I'm selling you, which you're turning this video over to me, or this audio, and I'm analyzing it, but you really don't know, but you don't have the capability in your law enforcement saying, hey, we don't have the equipment or the workforce to deal with this. Like, it's outside of our realm. And especially for the cases that are going to be like not a threat of harm to self or others, but the case where here's a video of a high school varsity player vaping, and they're saying, I never did that. And now they're booted off a game, and so they're not playing in games, and the team is losing. And, so there's just a lot of, or, it could be stuff like that. So, so we get deep. What is the authentic record? Like, how far away are we as a society of schools will record everything, but then does that work? Like, do we get to a point where everyone kind of has their own, like a body cam type thing? But the fact, though, I was driving home, as I said, none of your organizations are helping you with this, and it's already in the room. It's already happening. And this could happen to you tomorrow. You could be the one where a disgruntled parent, and it doesn't even have to be like people, right? It could just be an algorithm on the web that catches part of a video and alters it. And then we saw that in the swatting, All Pro Leamington. Some of the swatting was just algorithms finding schools and having a script and calling that, and reporting locally. So some of this is just out there on the web, and it's not being run by anybody right now. So how do you deal with this, right? And so tomorrow on Three Beers Podcast, one of the best kind of little tidbits, a gem in the velocity of information, is on page 69. And I wrote about how in the year 2020, Major League Baseball, right, the fans had to largely stay home. So they would digitally put fans in the stands, and they showed this during a clip, like a half-minute clip or something like that, where here, like, half the fans at Wrigley Field are Brewer fans and half are whatever. And here they're doing the wave, and they could change the shirts that they're wearing and if they're standing and all this. And watching that, I was like, wow, like, that's very realistic, especially, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't be looking that closely. And you can imagine it's refined significantly. Like, every single person has a little profile, and then you zoom out a little bit. And if so, this could be done for almost anything, right? Anything that you're getting for media information. So what's your authentic record? How do you do the member checking? But with schools, if you had a rash of this, like All Pro Leamington was saying, if you had 3 or 4 instances where, someone in that community was disgruntled, and here's a deep fake, and it's a school board or 2 school board members saying something, or it's a administrator and whatever. And you could pretty much just wipe out, erode the trust, and just like grind that district to a halt. Or it could be a police department, you make allegation, or a fire department, or It's just endless, right? So the thing is, where's the side of this that if you're involved in this, again, if you're the administrator, where do you turn to? How do you investigate this? How do you determine if this video is indeed a deepfake? So, that was the point where I kept driving home and saying, your organizations are aware of this. You're paying them thousands of dollars and they're not addressing this. And as a Department of Justice, um, at the state level, this should be addressed. And it is unrealistic and it's going to be disastrous to expect 421 districts to independently deal with this. You'll have vendors. There's no doubt you will have vendors come in and say, here's a product, right? And it's going to mostly be like you'll upload stuff in a portal. I mean, that would have to be the way that it would work. And they'll give some competence level. You have to match it with a policy, but that's you could end up firing someone because you're hiring, for $2,000 a year, this company, and you have no idea. And they send back this video and they're like, yep, this is 90%. We believe it's 90% authentic. So, anyway, that was interesting. And it was one of those things too, where I'm like, at the end of class, I said, a number of you who aren't administrators will be interviewing for administrative positions. And when you do that, be careful what you say, because if you start to lead with some of this stuff, it's going to freak people out, right, in their districts and kind of make them nervous. So you don't want to be the person to kind of say, hey, like, I know, to make them aware. But if they have an opportunity, if they give you the opportunity to say, like, what do you see on the horizon that maybe challenges or opportunities for schools that other people aren't seeing? I think I've given you a lot of opportunity ideas, but like a challenge idea would be this, right? And I think that would resonate really well with an interview committee. So we spend a little bit of time on the last day of saying, where I just say, I think in this day and age, like, to get really granular in an interview is just not. So, someone to sit down and say, put together a budget. I remember I interviewed for a principal job when I was like 25 or something. I just started my administrative classes, and it was a middle school assistant principal job. I didn't get it, but I remember as part of the interview, the interview team, handed me schedules and like qualifications of teachers and said, here, like, build out a schedule for this class of students. And it was just weird. And I was like, and I don't think I did it well, but it was one of those things where I'm like, this seems like a weird thing to be asking at an interview, because if I'm hired in, someone here would teach me how your system works, right? And there's already structures in place of how you do schedules. So to kind of give me this stuff cold is really, I thought, weird. And I would never do that in an interview, to give somebody those things to critique, again, because those structures, especially if you're new, someone is going to teach you those. So it's just kind of a weird thing. But I said, advocacy is a big thing, getting out there, using the words like, I'll be a good steward of the resources that currently exist. And then, that the district will be an exemplar. You want people to come and see, like, the great things that are happening here with your 4K program or your 3D additive printing lab, and how you've added curriculum to that or whatever. But, and that you become a clearinghouse for some of that stuff, people coming in to your district and stuff like that. So, but anyway, so there was a point, and I get pretty intense on some of the legal stuff. And one of my students, they're already school leaders, right? I wouldn't say challenge me, but did say, what you're saying goes against how the practice works, right? And we feel we have, in my district, a practice. It's very effective and within the constraints of how we have to do things. And I said, I get what you're saying. Like, and I'm not telling you that with all of the tools kind of taken away from you, like you're using the maybe one of the best tools still available. But I'm also pointing out some significant legal um, issues and liabilities with this practice. And just because everybody's doing it is it doesn't, it doesn't justify it. And it's become one of those things that's become ingrained in your attorney, right? I'm sure if you go back and you call your school attorney, they'll tell you, well, what we're doing is just fine. Your professor is, he's not running a district. And that's where too, and I'm very, very real. I said, I'm not in your role. So I know there's certain things that have to be done to keep the machine moving. But I'm saying like this is already a big issue, and this will become a bigger issue. I'll prolong and saying I've had an interview where they wanted me to present financial analysis. Wasn't a fan of it either. Yeah. So, um, I mean, in my career, I've interviewed a lot of people, and thankfully, like now, that's I'm not interviewing people, and I'm also not being interviewed for job stuff. And it's with the consulting and stuff like that. I could book. I think one week I worked 84 hours, and that was with the university stuff. I mean, that wasn't all like billable hours, but I mean, I was marking down like the hours I was working. Um, but I mean, I could just do that. I mean, I could fill up every hour, with that. And it's just because, it's clients I work with, or I could expand out with those clients or other stuff. Like I don't have a resume anymore. I mean, I just know who you are, and who you've worked with. So at that point, it's like, reports to kind of nobody. But it's Bolo, our good friend from Canada. Bolo, look at that. So guys, tomorrow 7:00, and I put it in the community thread. I'll be over on the Three Beers podcast. Chris Harmon, Otson Burke, Craig Ansel, and Brand Bowden. Great group, and so we're going to be. They brought me on, and we'll be talking about velocity of information, and they'll have a lot of kind of twists and turns we'll take to that. But I put over here on my screen, I have some notes just for myself. I want to make sure I talk about cognitive offloading, of like how much information we're putting in the cloud, because research is saying now, like in velocity of information, it was 30% of people just dump pretty much everything into the cloud, right? And the thing is, though, like the internet is becoming less reliable. Belarus and Myanmar and 29 countries suspended internet service in 2020 during protests and things like that. So like, if things get iffy, especially in 2024 election year, I wouldn't count on being able to access my Google Drive on a reliable basis or something like that. But the member checks, velocity of information. If you could get 4 other people from different areas, geographic different areas, and say, hey, like what's happening at the store? Like, are they out of bone broth, or what's stocked, what's not stocked? What are you seeing with banking? Are you still seeing shortage? How about, medical appointments, stuff like that? Is, like, is stuff not happening? Or is it like you're getting a call from your dentist because they're not busy right now? So, hey, come in and, consider this, fill in the gap between your teeth. I've had that a couple times. I'm like, I'm good with it. No problem. So, yeah, and then you can really get a much better feel of intelligence, right? Of what is authentically happening out there. Because I think the media is complete garbage. And so using the member check and how that worked for me in 2020, and Brian Bowden was part of that. He's a guest. He's one of the hosts on the show. The deep fakes we'll get into. Then also 3D printing. People forget that during the pandemic, I don't want to make the show a lot about the pandemic, but during the pandemic, patents and trademarks were lifted on some products and pieces of equipment. So there were 140 more than 140 social media groups from 36 countries and 18,000 people with 3D printers who were printing parts for ventilators and medical equipment and other stuff because the supply chain was shut down. So they were like just, printing it, creating it, or someone would have something and say, hey, this broke down and we can't get this part right now for whatever, for city utilities. So like people would analyze it and someone would come up with a schematic and someone else would print it. Right. So this decentralized manufacturing was really amazing. And then it shut down because companies make money right off of selling stuff. And if everything is 3D printed, or a lot of stuff is 3D printed, you lose your stores and it becomes this copyright and trademark issue and stuff. And I also was saying, back then it looked like 3D printing because I had studies I cited from General Electric and others that were creating machines and they were already 3D printing food. So basically, it's kind of, you know, 3D print at that point was probably more like if you were to mold, like mash up a carrot and then like mold it into a carrot shape, it would still be kind of a mushy carrot. But I thought that was going to be big. Like I thought it would be by now you'd start to have like some 3D printed, you know, I don't think making a 3D printed French fry is necessarily easier than making a French fry, um, but that never took off. Like at least it hasn't yet. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just saying like everything I was reading was kind of in that direction, and this money these big corporations were already putting into it. So, and then of course deepfakes, because I think deepfakes and avatar realism. And I presented on PBS in 2019, and the last quarter of the presentation was about avatar realism and like little Michaela Sosa and how she had 1 million followers and she wasn't real, right? But you could put her in any venue, you could put any type of clothing that then would be marketed by her as an influencer, and she didn't exist. So again, like how much of the world, even progressively, are we just not authentically interacting with? You're like, I watch this person on YouTube. It's like, well, not really. That's an avatar. You see an ad or whatever you see in media or stuff like that. So, but I think I think that's pretty interesting. I think there's this mosaic strengths concept with 3D printing, like of getting people together and be able to solve stuff and actually physically create it. One thing, so I've been thinking if I was to write another book, which would be crazy because, oh my God. And I usually when I wrote both books, I wrote them when I was really busy. So it seems to be like when things kind of click. But I was thinking, if I were to write another book, it would be with liminal spaces. Liminal spaces are like, so psychology would be kind of in between things. So like you graduate high school and then like what's next? Or if you are driving, right, you go across a bridge. A bridge is a liminal space. Like you're really not meant to spend time out there on the bridge other than just like crossing it. If you're walking in a building, a hallway is a liminal space. It's just there to get you from one place to another. You're not going to have a meeting in a hallway. But I think we're in this weird liminal space thing that people haven't exited out of in the last like 4 years. Well, yeah, 3-4 years, right? People have been in this weird space, and I think it just gets weirder by the day. So like the world is strange. And so anyway, it is really this time when I think people are very uncertain of what is authentic. If that makes any sense. But I've taken quite a few notes on that, and I've researched more into liminal spaces, and there's been, there's actually, people who write books and study liminal spaces. And I think there's an interesting part of safety. So there's a researcher who researches the location of school violence, like the physical location, like in a hallway, in a parking lot, stuff like that. And he's indicating like violence has shifted outside of the classroom into hallways and out in parking lots and around schools, right? To less hardened areas or less supervised or easier to access. So the liminal spaces now are where you're encountering an increased amount of violence or nonlinear chaos events. Um, so I think that shift has been very rapid, and no one has really written about it. So I would do that, and I would do a case study that I do with my superintendent class. I would write that as a chapter, which I think is great. I love that case study. So I can't tell you, but I and then I would also go into and I would write out like when you're talking, I'd write out this whole thing about deep fakes and how no one's really prepared for this in a government level and how I would kind of address this. Um, but I think I've got a pretty good thing going with this idea. But I mean, it would have to be school safety because School of Airs by far outsells Velocity of Information. Both Velocity of Information is more popular internationally. School of Airs is internationally represented, but um, Velocity of Information is in the National Defense Library, Library of Congress, presidential libraries. So it has some very prestigious areas, I guess. But for sales, right, it's School of Airs, it's school safety. That's what people Google. That's what parents are going to look for. Velocity of Information has a nice niche market. People have to discover it, and it's really a cool book. But it's one of those things that kind of has to, I think, be out there a while and get its cult following. But I had somebody watched me on PBS a couple of weeks ago. So what happens with the PBS presentations is they get brought back into programming. So 2013 and 2019, the two PBS presentations, the 2013 one was an hour and 20 minutes. So it's a little hard to put in programming unless you can shoehorn some kind of 10-minute commercial or whatever spot into it to make it fit. But the 2019 one was exactly an hour, right? Because they specifically said, we can't syndicate it anymore if it's longer. So, so people will email me. I'll get up, check my email, and someone will say, "Hey, like I saw your presentation this morning at 4 a.m. in the state." And here's, thought. It's typically always positive. And then there's usually a question of like, well, what are you doing now? Like, do you have a new book you're working on? And they don't know Velocity of Information exists because it came out, after and I suppose you could just Google my name. It's not that hard to find, but so it depends. Some of them I have like a journal article that I've written, or depending on what their background is, I might send it. Otherwise, I just say, hey, like, yeah, I I don't have anything in the mix right now, but I'm, I guess keep following. You'll know if it's out there. So Zippy's talking about IP rights. So yeah. So another thing that's going to happen. So Zippy, you're right, is critical thinking. So schools are coming in and they're banning the use of ChatGPT. So in my state, a couple school districts have done that just because it's easier to ban it than to figure out how they're going to use it. Personally, I wouldn't ban it. I've used ChatGPT quite a bit to refine things. So what it does for me is it will take a draft and it will, grammatically improve it, or I can have something and, you type in, shorten this. And so stuff like that, as far as like just taking the work and getting the work improved. Now, as far as like Chat GPT for research, it's awful for that because it doesn't cite anything. And then I pressed it a couple times to try to cite stuff and it cited like the wrong authors for the wrong works. And so it's really good for, or for like, some quick task. So, about school budget stuff or whatever. I mean, there are certain things that I can put in there and it can quickly, kind of get something out I can use. but it really is. It's basically like having an editor. For me, um, when I would compile something and respond with consulting, right, I'm having to read through it a couple times. And now if I do a draft, I can usually type improve this, paste it, as long as I keep it pretty generic, and then it's usually comes back much more refined because I would have got there, but and then I can go in and kind of move it forward from there. So there isn't any quality of information that's being added; it's just it's being reorganized in a much better way. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I actually saw you're saying Zippy about firing the janitor because the principal got caught. Anyway, so there's actually like robot janitors now. They're being introduced to some settings. Saw that today, but so Allpro Lemonton saying my company is encouraging us to use their licensed version of ChatGPT as much as possible. Interesting. So I like it. I'm glad I you know started to use it. It has saved me time, significantly in that um, processing of, again, that first draft where all of my content is there, and I can even say, change this to a sixth grade reading level, right? And I might do that for something that's kind of a new concept or something that I'm working on that, it just gets too technical in it, or like, so I'm learning and I'm liking it, but I think the reality is it's going to be ubiquitous, right? So it's going to be like the age of, you know, back in 1960s where they were banning calculators from schools, the early calculators. And I just don't see where first in personal devices, one-to-one tablets and iPads, was a big thing 20, 25 years ago. And I think, was that kind of tipped, and now all the kids have them. But, so it is interesting. Velocity of Information sounds like a tinfoil hat. What are you talking about there? That's a great book. So, um, I'm actually, I'm amazed at how much territory I covered in that book in like 211 pages or whatever. And just the awesome interviews and the really unique stories in that book. You know, talk about Aaron Sawyer in Chicago with the the 3D interactive video game stuff where you're wearing the equipment, getting the haptic feedback and stuff, and then he had it shut down, and then he turns it into an office. So then we have the ad where people come in and it becomes an office that they rent during the day, and then now he has two of these places doing really well. But and then how everyone was deemed essential or non-essential. But it's a really original book that had to be written in vivo in the moment that things were happening, and I think it will just continue to grow its audience. But School of Errors is definitely the hallmark book, because people, whenever they're emailing me, and, they find the stuff, they'll be like, "Oh, I ordered your book." So it would make sense to do a follow-up on that, but I don't know. I don't know how much, I've told people too, I said, the school safety world is different than it was when the book came out. The book came out in 2019 before the pandemic. So, now you've got a lot more of where students are not in school as much, they're taking more stuff remote, and no one really wrote about what does safety look like during a pandemic. And I don't want to do that. That's not really an interest area. I probably wouldn't even put a chapter in about that, but things are things are just too wavy right now. We haven't kind of settled in from the last couple of years. So like, I just don't think I'd want to write anything for at least a year or two to kind of see where things go with schools. But I do think the deep fake and the avatar realism would be a big part of a new book. And then at liminal spaces of saying, the whole concept of safety has changed just in the last 2 years. Right. And then you know, coming with a case study and then an area of saying, like, if you really want to learn from your exercises, here's how to put them together, and here's what to measure. And so I do that in my classes, and that's all pretty organic, strong stuff that works very well. So, um, so the title of that book would be I would use my PBS title, School Safety in America, um, Rhetoric versus Reality. So that would be the title of the book, which I think would be a very good title. I couldn't title it like Liminal Spaces and Safety because like no one would buy that. No one would know what that is. So it would be, yeah, School Safety in America, Rhetoric versus Reality. And then it also would have a double benefit because it would tie in to my PBS presentations. So there's already some pre-existing marketing out there. So, but I don't know. It is so much work to put a book together. Here I am whining about work and stuff like that, but it is like, from start to finish, it's like 2 years, because you're pitching to publishing houses and you get a proposal and a timeline and your research and drafts and interviewing and writing. And I mean, these are really crucibles when you're doing nonfiction, 471 endnotes in velocity of information. So, yeah, I don't know. It's out there. I think I can visualize it, like I sat down and I kind of roughed it out, but Zippy saying velocity of information sounds more interesting. Haven't you read both books, buddy? If not, I'll send them to you. My good friend, Zippy, come on. Seriously. Or there's the audiobooks of both of them out there. So I'll get them to you. Just let me know. It depends. School of Airs has some really cool stuff in it, like interviewing Katie Pashon in the Cajun Navy and how they sprang into action in a number of hours as, this town was flooding and the fire department had one boat. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in School of Airs, but if you're not interested in the World Trade Center and how that evacuation of 500,000 people in 9 hours by boat, a full chapter on that. So, velocity of information though is more. They're two different topics, right? So that's where people, I think, kind of believe velocity of information is a school safety book or a safety book. It's not really. It's just a psychology book, and there's a lot of cool things about just how people, individuals or groups, function during chaos. And I give a lot of examples and a lot of interviews, and like, it was really cool to research that book. The Wehrmann M. Eisen, the wood soldier in Vienna, and Germany in World War II, where they put these wooden statues basically of a soldier or a ship, right, in your community, and you'd have to pay a penny or a nickel or whatever, and you'd be given a nail and you'd nail it in, and eventually this whole thing would be covered with nails that look like it's made of steel. So you can check those out. The Iron Man, or Wehrmann M. Eisen. But it was two things. It was one of contributing, and others could see you contribute and celebrate your contribution to the war effort. And I said, there was something to that in the US. It's kind of like the victory gardens and stuff like that, but we don't have that today. And we also we don't, this doesn't really fit into a book anywhere. But that also kind of came with like your volunteerism and your groups and volunteer fire departments. I was watching a documentary put out by, I think, Nebraska PBS 3 weeks ago. So usually I try to find documentary, keep it up on a side screen if I'm doing some busy work at night. And what they were saying is just a lot of these fire departments are folding because people aren't, there's more training, so you have to commit to that. People aren't staying in communities, so transient, so they go where the job is going, so they're not committing to the fire departments and EMS. And again, there's trying these volunteer fire departments, which in Nebraska was the majority of fire departments. and the challenges that they faced, and how the costs of equipment and trying to keep these things going. So they're literally like having whole communities just like lose their fire departments. Um, but there is something in this whole induction process too. Um, so it was, I don't know where I was exactly going with that, but so School of Airs. Um, so the two that read School of Airs loved it. Titles of great impact. What, Zippy? Are you beating up on the doc here tonight? What's going on? So School of Airs was originally supposed to be titled Lessons of Lower Manhattan. That was my title because a lot of it was centered on the 9/11 rescue, the boat rescue, and I liked it. We had a really cool cover, but then the publisher, kind of when we were getting closer to publishing time or proof time, and that's when it goes in and layout and stuff. They said, it's too regional, and it's going to throw people off. They're not going to know it's a school safety book. So we pretty much have to just say school safety's on it, right? So then I was coming back, and it was Dr. Sean Dickers, who I had interviewed for the book. And I was running this kind of quandary by him. I said, they want me to change a title, and I get it, right? But I don't know what to change it to. And we were talking, and he came up with School of Airs because he was saying this kind of, what you're writing about is kind of like Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors, where you know better, but you are still making these poor decisions and right. So that's based. And so School of Airs is also like, better than to, believe that you can fortify your way to safety, but you're doing it anyway. Right. So there was a nice play, and that's actually served really well. And then rethinking school safety in America. So like it hits well, but so that just takes care of itself now. I don't do much, and I've shut down a lot of my, kind of I had the domain names, and I think I gave those up because I just needed those to redirect for a while. But a book after like 2 years, it's pretty much done, because then libraries are not interested in buying it anymore. Bookstores, unless, it's like a perennial hit. Um, so, you kind of have your run. And then because things are printed on demand and the audiobook and accessibility and school safety, like School of Airs always trends with whatever's happening across the country. And it probably always will. So I think if I were to write again, it would kind of be in that genre, but we'll see. It's Andrew S. Look at this guy. It's a good business idea. Good business idea. Short sleeve suit. Be good for people in Florida. So a short sleeved suit. It's humid, but you want to stay cool, but you still need to be professional. Short sleeve suit. So, right there. Take it and run with it. So yeah. It is kind of interesting to get emails, from people who see the PBS stuff, because I have my email address on the first slide, so you can go back and find it. And then it's the first time they've interacted with it, right? So they see it, and then I don't remember what's exactly in these presentations. So there'll be some very specific questions about whatever, and be like, God, it's been 10 years since I did the first one. So yeah. And the question too is like, are you going to return to PBS? Which isn't as, there's a PBS would have to want me back, and I would be interested in doing that, but it would have to be like a year, 2, 3. It has to be when this AI deep fake avatar stuff plays out a little more, and then to talk about it, so it wasn't as abstract to talk about it when it was actually had impacted people. So the timing isn't right to do a school safety presentation to approach PBS and to try to do the trilogy. I don't even know if I would do that. I just both were very good and very distinct, very well delivered and researched, but I don't know. Same with the book. I mean, it's not really high on my lists, but now at least I've started to kind of think about it. But I haven't written it. I had the journal article, substantial one in Phi Delta Kappa, came out last fall, and I haven't even touched any writing since then. And I would be able to write, journal articles, because once you've published in journal articles, you can usually come back in. There are some places like you have to apply and they'll decide if they'll publish or not. But once you've kind of published a few things with a journal or whatever, you talk to them and say, hey, like I'd be interested in writing about whatever. And they'll either tell you yes or no. So, but again, I mean, there's part of it which was satisfying. I enjoyed that. And there's also part of it now of like, there's no, writing a few more journal articles doesn't move me down the road or toward a goal or toward a job, because I'm quasi retired. Actually, I was retired and then, came back here. But so it doesn't do stuff like that. And so I don't know. So I think there is this thing too where I'm like, I don't really want I don't want to get too much into the school safety presenting and things like that. Because I think velocity of information was, I needed to write something, I needed to study something that wasn't school safety, but was of high interest to me. And that's where velocity of information kind of fit the bill. And so there are other authors I know who feel like they kind of get stuck in a genre and they want to try to see if they can break out and do something, I don't know if it was completely different, but significantly different. So velocity of information would be much like a Malcolm Gladwell, John Ronson type of book, kind of like a study of contemporary things and putting it together. I think it's phenomenal. I'm really glad that I did that. I think it's going to be a terrific legacy title out there. But so it becomes one of those things too, of a little bit of self-reflection of, should I write? Do I have another book, in my mind to write? And I had I had a nonfiction history book, I wrote like 20 years ago, which was kind of like, what was it, Nicolas Cage movie when he stole the Constitution or whatever. It was kind of long. That was pretty cool, but I wouldn't see trying to bring that back. But yeah, and I would like to go and maybe do a little more in-person presenting, but I have no desire to get on a circuit and drive and fly to places and do that. I mean, there are great people doing that in the area of school safety. It's not where I'm at right now. National Treasure. Yeah. So I had a book that was kind of similar-ish to that. It's pretty cool. But, so Zippy, 2 books sold very differently. Yeah. The thing with the 2 books, so School of Errors, though, wasn't strong internationally. Velocity of Information is strong internationally. Like you can go to the United Arab Emirates and you can be in Germany and you're going to find that book. So it is interesting, the world presence of that book. So it's just an observation. And again, it's one of those things where unless you really had this tremendous marketing who's going to know? So really, like, I mean, velocity of information sounds cool, right? But I mean, unless you read a little bit, or the nice thing about the audiobook is you can listen to 3 minutes for free, and Ben Hawk narrates it. So, the audiobook is doing well. Um, so yeah, all pro Lemonton is saying urban safety next is getting rough out there. It's true. Absolutely right. And I think that is also being reflected in school safety, shootings at football games, like threats. Here, I think it was a regional or sectional football game in the state of Wisconsin, more in the Milwaukee area, where they either moved it or they didn't have any fans there. And then I think they were trying to get it like another district to host it. And you'd have to be crazy to be another district to host where there could be potential altercations happening. Then people would bring that to your site. But yeah, I think, and see, urban safety, it's like Clay Martin and Concrete Jungle, which I have, and I interviewed Clay, so it's not my area. I don't know that, other the point you there to point you to Joe Dolio and Tactical Wisdom, right? People who really know their stuff. So, but I think I've got some new contributions to make in the area of school safety. And I'm the one out there who can be punchy, right? I don't have a board of education who can call me on the carpet and say, we don't want you saying, this, or, and the university has always been behind everything I've done. Like, they've really championed the work. And I mean, I don't cross the real controversial, stuff, but, so I don't know. I've got to just kind of think, I've got to think things out a little bit. So, but Joe and Clay would say, don't be there at a game that has history. Yeah, they would, right? And that's absolutely right on. So yes. So so that was a big thing too. One of the school, so that happened at a time when I was teaching the superintendent legal class, and one of the new soups said, can we talk about this in class? Got a hold of me and said, like, because he said, so how would I want to know how other people in class would handle this? Like, what if it was your site? Would you change it to a daytime game? Or what if the WIAA, the athletic organization for the state, said you can't hold a game before Friday night at 3 p.m.? I mean, there are all these rules, right? To have a game be legit. Would you cancel a game? But I mean, would you hire additional security? What if your police, said, hey, we can provide whatever, but if you have this threat that there could be gang violence at this, you're going to have to hire security, to keep a perimeter, but then you have, lights on in this field. And so how are you going to do this? So, and that's where I would come back and say, what are your organizations telling you that you're paying thousands of dollars to, or your state sanctioning organizations? And because there's going to be a time when the police will say, we're not going to send 5 officers in our police force of 7, to the high school for a basketball game. And there's a threat of that, there could be from the other community, that there could be a gang fight or something like that. So, it's going to be on you. And then if you know this threat and you hold this game and don't have appropriate security there, or I don't know. I mean, so we were going through that, and I said I would run that past my insurance carrier and my attorney ahead of time. Like, these are questions. See, these are like where the state conferences. And this was my point, of saying, why isn't this a discussion at your state conference? Because everybody's thinking about this. And I watched a few videos of an attorney who actually addressed, like, for example, what if you were in a vehicle that was in the middle of a protest or something like that, and you didn't know it, like you come around a corner and suddenly, and someone's trying to get in your vehicle. But what if it's different? What if it's a school bus, right? Or what if it's a van transporting students from a, you know, a business leadership trip or whatever it is, a golf outing, and now this van is there? Like, what's the discretion of the person in charge who's driving that van? So these are questions where they need to be addressed, and they're absent from these. And that was a point that I was really impressed with my fall students, because I think they were on the same plane I was with that, of saying, the expectations you have for your organizations have to be conveyed, and you have to say, like, this is happening in our district, like these things are happening, and you have to give guidance, like like the deep fake stuff, or the violence if it's at a football game or a big setting or something like that. And or what if it is, again, transportation is interrupted because of if it's a protest or something. But I mean, because they're just authentic things now. And there's a lot of things. I don't do this activity anymore because it felt like it was punching down. Yeah, it felt like it was better than that. But for a while, I would print out some of the state organizations, and I would print out, here's their conference and here's their sessions and their breakouts. So let's take a highlighter and let's go through what is kind of interesting and what is essential to you right now to be able to function, versus, like a keynote person coming up and saying, so, it didn't take long to go through and find 80% of the stuff was, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it could be replaced and should be replaced with stuff that is very, relevant with schools, such as how are you managing increased allergies? For example, EpiPens, where are you getting them? How are you, who's being trained on them? Narcan, opioid antagonist, right? What are you doing there? Could a student administer it to another student? What's your policy? So like things like that. So it was funny too, because I had one class this fall where I was really hitting up some of the organizations in this, like, our state Department of Ed. And you can tell when a student like goes and questions the organizations, and then of course they probably say, like, this was covered in class, or I'm asking, because then in LinkedIn it'll say, like, your profile was viewed, and then it'll say, like, these organizations, or it might not say the people, but I'll be like, oh, like, it was viewed because of class. People went and then they were asking their organizations, and then they're checking what in the world is happening. But again, I report to nobody. I'm Axel Foley. So, and PhD and being 2 times on PBS and books and stuff like that, there's really nothing they can do. And everything I say is accurate. Like Department of Justice has you submit your school safety stuff in Wisconsin January 1st. It's a submission date. It's kind of crazy, right? Why did you submit stuff on January 1st? It's when it is, when it always is. But it's bacon. Well, hello, bacon. I'm doing a kind of practice run, a sound check stuff tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to be a guest on the Three Beards podcast. Three Beards, it is, the link to the show is up in the community tab of this channel. So I'm looking forward to that. And I needed to check out my mic and check out my headset and everything, because I haven't used this mic since April. I've typically just used the headset when I'm consulting. Well, not typically. I use I had to dust this all off, and it's not easy because a lot of stuff here. But so I had to do this and then make sure, like, the computer was recognizing it, because it immediately searches for the headphones. And I knew I'm not consulting again until Monday. So if I had to mess around with stuff after tomorrow to kind of get things recalibrated to the headset, I could do that. But I didn't want to go on the show tomorrow and then, like, have technical difficulties, which could still happen, I guess. But it's Krabby Turtle. Well, good evening. Good evening to you. So Um, so yeah. Um, what Alper Lemonton's saying, a movie theater had these 20 something non professional looking kids armed. I felt less safe with them there. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's shocking how little regulation there is on security guards, armed security guards. A lot of places are using them now. I doubt their competence and skills, right? And then that comes back to the liability of the institutions, right? I mean, if you're, if you're a school district and you're holding this regional football game, right? And if you don't hold it, you have to forfeit it, right? And you hire private security, what does that mean? And what level of force could they use to maintain a perimeter? And I mean, this is stuff you are going to have, 12 hours to make a decision, right? So, and your lawyer will give you the plus or minus, and in the police department is either going to tell you we've got it covered, or we can do this part, but the rest is on your own. And it's like holding a concert. The police aren't there to have security for a concert. They'll have some presence, right? But there's event security that needs to be there. So what is your event security, or do you have to hire event security? And who, it's not even who pays for it. It's like, what is the expectation? What are they armed? Are they not armed? Are they? So again, this would be a great breakout session, at a conference, or kind of to thread to this, but you don't see it. So that's something. So in my teaching style over the last 20 years, in the last 3 years, I really shifted and am very upfront of saying you need to put this in front of your state organizations and say, figure this out, or work with us, or figure out like some sites that have encountered this and let us have them present on how they dealt with it. But they don't do that, because then if you bring up one site and you're like, here, we'll talk about the school and how they handle whatever, then there's this perception that, well, then the other schools didn't do as well, so you're not highlighting them, which is garbage. But that's then, if you feature one person, the perception is everyone else is doing it wrong, which just drives me nuts. So the security guard at a grocery store almost bumped into me because he wasn't watching where he was walking. Dude looked like he'd never been in a fight. Andrew, yikes. So yes. So would you guys, Misty, Mrs. Wayne, appreciate all you guys, so the other thing is too, like, I do miss doing the shows, the safety doc. I think I had 202 episodes, which is all audio, video. Actually, I lost a number on that drive that went down, but then I was going back and I was downloading, and there are still like episodes that are missing, but they're out there on YouTube, I think. So I'd have to go back and maybe something in summer. I think I still like 30. I'd have to download. It takes a long time to like download a 3-hour show and then rip audio from it. But all the blog posts are there. So there's a lot of really good content, and people like cite that. So you'll find like an article and someone will cite like a blog post, because that's something you can do now. In the old days, you couldn't do that, but you can cite a credible blog post. So like, I don't want to take it down because some of the stuff is actually cited. But I do miss that. It was trying to do a blog post and level audio and all of that was getting to be pretty crazy. And of course, when the books were coming out, it was good to have the show because I was able to share about the books. But I don't know. And really, like, I don't know what I would do that would be interesting. So, I'm not going to, a show about school safety itself wouldn't work. I mean, what I was doing was pretty good, but, it kind of grew to, 1,200 subscribers, and it just, kind of stayed there. So, if you're not going to be like a YouTuber or an influencer or something, it's definitely, when I was doing expert witness work, to be doing the podcast was a good thing because you could say, well, I've interviewed this person or have expertise in this area because I researched it and that actually worked. Like, um, but you know, Bacon is saying to Andrew, to be fair, most people haven't these days. How would hiring agencies know? I think it's like been in a fight. So yeah. Um, so tomorrow got the show, and if I was to do another book, anyone have any ideas of like what would be if it was? It would have to be safety themed, unfortunately, because if it wasn't, it's just not going to sell. You know, you can't do something of saying like liminal spaces or like whatever. Like just no one would know what it is. It wouldn't sell. And school safety is just a big genre, and you know, so it's not pressing. And I also like I would check in with some different publishers. I might change things up and go with a different publisher if I were to do that. I don't know. Nothing pressing. But today feels good because it is a break. When I ended my consulting today, it ended pretty much nonstop from what day did I start? Let me go back to my calendar. August 14th, I started my contracts, which was 3 weeks earlier than I usually do. And that just ended my summer like in a day. So, and man, oh man, oh man, it was a crazy, crazy fall. So yeah, there were times also in the classes, and, and there's a lot of expectation because you come in and I wrote your book, like your textbook, right? And been on PBS, and so like people really, so you have a big name, and you've been there 20 years, so but I also like throughout the class, I'm like, I need to be, I, so I, well, the best way to describe the way that I teach is Robin Williams' performance in Doubtfire, right? So the kind of the energy he brought to that whole performance is what you get from me from the moment class starts till the moment class ends. And that was really hard to do this year, just not because of the content, it's just like physically I was kind of it was burned out. And so, and I usually tell the students right at the start, like, if you haven't had me for a class before, or you've heard, right, this will get, it's pretty animated. It's never crazy, but it's pretty animated, like run around the room or pretend like there's a code that you have to punch in to open up the door to like, document how some of this stuff happens in school safety. And so like what you see, you'll get used to. And I think you'll appreciate it because the energy. And I said, as a student, as someone who has 2 masters and a PhD, my God, did I appreciate the professors who had a sense of humor, knew what they were doing, used real life examples and some stories, and were energetic. That, those were the classes you love to go to. So I said, that is what I'm trying to do. And also for me, it's better. Like this is a very natural style for me. So like now it's pretty subdued, but and so Andrew's saying, Michael Malice has a quote like, the only time most people see violence is in public school. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So Bolo Doc idea, how to maintain situational spatial awareness in a world of lies. Ooh. Yeah. I like that. So remember that because I think that is really cool. That actually is that's a good title. Donna Miles has a book coming out, Hard Target Living. And I've been able to chat with her a few times. I really admire her work. And um, she shares, she lived outside of Seattle with her husband, and their house was broken into during the night. And it was very violent. I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And so she presents on this now, and she's, has since moved to Florida. But so she is into this, uh, really excellent network of kind of, you would think like a Joe Dolio and Clay Martin into that, and Hard Target Living. She's phenomenal. So, but I would bring in like, so there's people I would interview. There's like a different set of people I would bring in and interview for that. But I like that, maintain situational and spatial awareness in a world of lies. That, for a title of a book, that rocks. You could even take like situational awareness, or you could even like spatial awareness in a world of lies. It'd have to be maybe situational awareness as a buzz term, but that is a really cool, because it really is. It's like deep fakes, and it's not only that, it's holograms, right? Like, um, you can project. So I have a friend who spends like, thousands and thousands of dollars on these displays, these Christmas displays, and all of that type of stuff, where it looks like there's 3D stuff happening on the house. Like for Halloween, it looks like there's a ghost coming out of the house, and it's all projectors. But I mean, it's thousands of dollars worth of equipment and programming. You can find stuff on the web. Like there's some people who really get into this. And like, right, if you didn't know it was a show, you'd think it was authentic. Now, it doesn't have to be a ghost, but you could project, like people walking around, or like a car or something like that. So, and with drones now, I've seen some video of more of the recent sophisticated drone shows where, the drones can look like it's an airplane, and it can, all light up in a pattern. So if it's in the right area, or like a helicopter or something like that, and the changing the color schemes, and if you can put a little bit of audio. But I mean, you don't know. So that's the whole thing of, it is just crazy. The authentic record, of course, and what the media shows I wouldn't trust. I was, oh my goodness. I just hate the evening news, the national news. I'm not a big fan of local news. I don't consume it, but I would write down, like ABC, what they would cover. And it usually didn't match what I would deem the sentinel events happening. Like, for example, the Maui um, fires that decimated and killed, what, 800, 1,000 people. We don't really know. That was short-term news duration, and there was no follow-up on that. And then Cajun Navy, that's a general term. I'm not talking about Cajun Navy relief. Like, there were some articles coming out how they were like coming in and supporting these areas. But I mean, wow, that was a quick, short coverage, and really strange, like to see what it was supplanted with, which was political stuff. But I was also pretty surprised, and I'll talk about this with Brian Bowden tomorrow, because Brian and I were doing the member check. He was part of the member check network during the pandemic, and that's when the U.S. Navy dispatched Mercy or Comfort, one of the hospital ships. They have two, but they had one they sent to New York, and then it was to provide support for hospitals, and it was only there for a few weeks, and it didn't have many patients, and then it just took off. So, like, it was a weird face validity, because Brian could like see this thing, so it wasn't like, you're just hearing through the news. Like, he could see it, and then could observe it for a while. And so it's like in velocity of information, where Joe Dolio would see certain things that were happening in Detroit, and he would just drive there to see for himself if he was seeing the same thing. an hour later. So I think that is this whole thing of people being fed stuff through TV. And TV's kind of getting old, right? Because if you're young, you're not really getting information from TV, but you're getting it from social media. Or um, and it's really like it's completely false. And how many even this whole thing of like sporting events, when Fox put out there and we can fill the stands up with fans, that probably happens all the time. And not that in that instance it probably matters a lot, but again, it matters if you're showing a rally, a political rally, and you make a crowd denser than it authentically is. I don't know, just a lot of weird stuff, but I think you're right on with that whole awareness thing. Because it is really weird navigating. And I'm on top of this, right? So I'm into this. I know what's going on. So you've got to think like people who, especially older people who are used to the news and that was their source, and now it's been all centralized, and you can't it's really difficult to verify things unless you do like this member check network, which I talked about how to set that up. You have the primary collector and there's all these terms and process, and Joe Dolio was awesome in his contributions. I think, I don't know, I cited like Joe like 18 times in the book. So Bacon, you had a claw hammer you carried around in your car, didn't you? I think you were telling me, or a framing hammer as self-defense, which I probably is a really smart idea. East Palestine, Ohio. Yeah, see, that's another example. If you go through, and that would be a day when I'd be like, oh, like this will be the lead story, and then tomorrow will be the lead story, and then next week they'll come back and they'll talk to community members, and then it just vanishes. And I'm just like, whoa. That was Colonial Pipeline was another one when a quarter of the country's, fuel aviation and gasoline was just halted, and it was a short term, and it would not even make the top headline. It's Chet Elkins CPA. That's a show that's on fire, by the way. So Chet Elkins CPA, that is, I had the privilege of meeting that guy before he was super famous, just when he was highly famous. Now he's Taylor Swift-ish type famous. So people are like, is Chet Elkins here? Is Chet Elkins at the game? It's up there in the skybox. Good guy. Great guy. So yeah, I still want to do sometime. I want to do a show on, and Chad, we had talked about this. What constitutes like a crisis situation where you can withdraw from retirement? Something. So, because I think there is this thing, this crossover with safety of that, where people are afraid or to access, or they access and they don't understand how that works. You have to pay this penalty and all this other stuff. Not to, but I think there's something there. And I've also been watching, like I watch the different markets and things like that. But, I also watch the data of the people who are taking withdrawals out of their retirement, early withdrawals, and taking like a penalty just to have the money. And that's like, it's at record highs. And it was like at a record high a year ago. And then like the next quarter, it's another record high. And it's like getting to be this really, again, something that's not talked about, but it's, I think, underpinning like how nervous people are and just like how fragile the economy is right now. But so yeah, so interesting stuff. But yeah, I would write down what was on the news. So, and how much time it got. So, okay, the news started and they did 3 minutes on this, and then they did 8 seconds on this, and then they did this, and that it wouldn't match up right with what was happening. What logically, if we were to sit down, right, five of us, and say, what should be the top thing on the news today? Like 4 out of the 5 of us would probably have it identified. Um, and then you'd see it would end up like, 13 minutes in as a B-roll footage thing. So, but I'm just not a fan. Not a fan. Um, so that is it's pretty big. But yeah. Um I would need to put together the list of people I'd interview. I would kind of do a topical thing. I'll still do um so Chad Elkins. So not to share too much personal stuff here, but I do have a child heading off to college next year, and I believe is wanting to follow the career path of you, Mr. Elkins. Um, so, which I think is pretty awesome, and but that's where things are going, and certainly has the aptitude, um, for that. So, but pretty interesting. So, yeah, no, don't be worried. But I was sharing with Aaron that the alpaca guy in Caputa, so in South Dakota, not too far, within an hour from where Aaron lives, but Glenn the alpaca guy. So in 2007, this guy Glenn built this kind of ranch, well, alpacas, like a 20-acre ranch, and you could go there. We took our kids out there, and they loved it. It was free. Nice guy, retired out of the medical field, so he's like 60 years old, and his family, they raised these alpacas. And then he sold the place like a couple months ago, and I emailed him. I was just like kind of looking because we are thinking about maybe going back out there, and and, and it was done, and I had his email because I think afterwards I sent him a picture of, he was just kind of starting out then. I sent him a picture of like, when the kids were younger, when we were out there, right? And said, here, like, it's really cool. Thanks for doing this free. Like, it's really awesome. And then he moved to Minnesota, and I shared it with Aaron. Aaron's like, what? Like, you moved to Minnesota. Aaron left Minnesota. This guy moves to Minnesota. But so yeah, no, it's just been putting in the grind. Yeah, Chad, I've been thinking about that. So I might be making a contact with you. And I think what I would do then is to have them just, talk to you for 20 or 30 minutes of just like, because, what are some options? And we do have, I have a CPA who does our taxes, who's also been really helpful. So, but for me, it's exciting because it's a really good aptitude match. We'll see where things end up, down the road, but it's anyway. I'm excited. I'm really excited for what the future holds, and um, so yeah, so she said, hey, like my Chromebook is old, and like a part of the screen and blinked out. Like I need a new laptop or MacBook. So I said, well, look, whatever you want, So she's checking out at Best Buy and different options, and then she finally said, here's what I want. So I said, go for it. So she takes good care of her stuff. So yes, but Yeah, so betcha Flint still are yeah, Flint, Michigan, right? Flint in the Flint tropics. Oh my god, when Jackie Moon in the tropics left Flint, Michigan, that town was never the same. Um, but it is there's like I said, there's all these crazy things going on too. Like if you order a fire truck today, so here's what people like don't realize too, like the supply chain. When I wrote Philosophy of Information, I was on for what was happening at the time, but now there's like additional weird stuff happening. It takes you 4 years to get a pumper from the day you order it, 5 years for a ladder truck. From because most of the trucks are made Pierce, which is owned by Oshkosh, but now they have government contracts that they have to fulfill for government equipment, which is going out of the U.S. So basically, you know, you have, and including the community I live in, 2 years ago, had put in an order for a vehicle that is still just blueprints, right? It's not even in queue yet. So these are some really bizarre things where, imagine your city is ordering a fire truck and they place the order and they say, okay, we anticipate it'll be delivered in January of 2027. I mean, that's the reality of that. And it's that garbage trucks was the other one, which are 4 to 5 years now. And there was I don't know if it was cement truck or something like that. That was like 3 years. Um, and it's because of the manufacturing, the facilities now are doing military contracts. And it's a huge curve for someone to enter and start building fire trucks, right? Like there's there's a lot that goes into that. So and now and they would have to compete then for the same equipment and pumps and all this other stuff that the others are. So you just have these weird timelines that didn't exist before for things, right? So um yeah, it's really strange. And the fact too, like you can order a fire truck for $700,000 a year ago, and then today, if you were to order it, it'd be 1.1 million, the same exact spec truck. And that truck hasn't been built yet. You locked in, your contract on it, but anyone placing that exact spec order today, 30% up. So it's really strange. And that's where I was a little bit off in philosophy of information. You have to make some predictions in a book, right? So you don't get everything right. But I believe I was right at the time, and this is all these additional supply chain things are a result of the military contracts absorbing this manufacturing capacity. Um, so I think that's been going on. So who am I? But um, and they are really also reducing. You're starting to see this shift, where AI is coming in, and you're seeing a lot of reductions at the university level. So like faculty reductions. I don't see it where I'm at. I teach in a specialized program. I'm the only one that also teaches the advanced legal issue classes. So if someday they told me you're going to be taught by a robot or a AI machine, and it's all going to be, well, then it is. Kind of beyond that point in my career, but you see these other institutions, and it's like, you know, you don't, you're offering 120 majors, like, they just expand it out too much. It's not sustainable. Now you have to keep these facilities up, and these kids aren't going, and they're not going to pay the rent to live in these cities, and then keep all these businesses going that lived off of the college students, right? Um, so you just see these college towns collapsing. I mean, they literally rent their dorms out for people to live in because the students aren't there. And these 2-year community colleges closing down. So again, I teach in like a license. You have to go through my class to obtain your license to be an administrator, stuff like that. So, my class is always pretty packed, but it's just weird. Fire engines are made by, they're made by usually Pierce has 80% of the manufacturing, and Oshkosh is the company, but they're made in not northern. They're made kind of in the Green Bay, Appleton, Oshkosh area. They have like they're different plants fabricating painting and all that is kind of around there. But there isn't like there's not a second place. So, but it is really weird to see some of this happening. And again, I think we're at this weird intersection. I wrote about it where 3D printing was, you saw the potential for that during the pandemic, where these 140 social media groups, 36 countries, 18,000 people could figure out how to do like a part for a machine, a medical machine. And they could say, here's the code, send it to your printer, print it, get it out. That the capability is there. So a lot of the stuff is going to become decentralized. The writer's strike, I mean, holy smokes. And these things are saying, limits on AI. Well, that ship has sailed. AI and ChatGPT, like that's here. I mean, again, it's something I shared earlier. I use daily consulting. I'll take my drafts and just put in, improve this, boom, put it in, and it's doing and it progressively is getting better. Again, it's not creating original material, and ChatGPT is horrible at citing. So like if you're saying like write a story about situational awareness, and it has to be like 50,000 words, I don't know what it would do, but but where is it getting its information? So that's always something. See, I'm just giving it information saying just put this grammatically together, better. But where is it sourcing its information? I think one time I was asking it about me. I'm like, what can you tell me about David P. Perotin? And then like for a while it was real dodgy. It's like, I can't tell you anything. I didn't exist before 2020. I'm like, well, he's been out there for a while. And then like, and I'd log in a different day, is there any books? And then eventually it would start to like come up with stuff. And like, there was one day it was like digging into papers. It was like doing, you could tell like searches and trying to, and then it was starting to synthesize and say, he has expertise in, disaster areas and whatever. So, and then after that, it kind of like shut down again. And so there is this weird level of what it accesses and what it doesn't, but I'm not there to study ChatGPT. I'm really just there of saying, just improve this or make it shorter or, whatever, if it's something like that. But yeah, how it sources information is pretty wild. And so, yeah, I mean, like for newspapers, and I know for podcasts, you can subscribe. It might be $30 a month. I know a couple podcasters who do this, and they were showing this to me back probably like when I was still podcasting, March, April. It would take this transcript and it would literally, boom, kick out a blog post of 500 words, right? And it would mostly be accurate. You probably would need to spend 10 or 15 minutes like tuning it up a little bit, but you'd have it. It would be there. But that wasn't the way I was doing things. I would like put my blog post together first and kind of work from that. And this is just like but weird stuff. It is really weird, weird stuff. So 2020 is maybe a lost decade. I think you're right with that. Yeah. I do think, and Andrew pointed this out previously, and he said, think about, there's every day people take millions of pictures digital, and look at computers don't come with DVD or CD drives anymore. So like 10 years ago, people burning all their stuff to CDs. What are you going to do with that now? And that stuff will not be accessible. So even though we're creating all of this material, especially like images and digital content, do you think you're going to be able to access this video in 20 years or in 50 years outside of YouTube, right? But you'd actually be able to like do this, or all the pictures that you took and now they're on your phone and you have 5,000 photos. Like, will you be able to access those photos? Or will there be a totally different right system? I mean, think of everybody who saved their stuff back on a zip drive or a floppy disk. Like you'd have to especially order that today, and would those JPEGs even be read and compatible? So even though we're creating all of this content, I think most 99.9% of it'll be lost. Where the old photo albums when we were kids, or at least I was a kid. I mean, my parents still have a photo album, from, I think they have two, like here's when you were like 0 to 8, and here's like 8 to 18. And you're taking a picture with a 35 millimeter camera, and that was it. And then you still have that today. But I just think, you know, right? I mean, that's really a good point. And how much we offload to the cloud, and just how much will get lost, or people will die. Somebody will pass away, and then everything that was in the cloud is gone, right? Or it's not accessed anymore, and it becomes lost. So we really get into this weird thing where, with this, as you cross into technology and with that cognitive offloading, I think you feel like you have a lot of stuff, but it is the digital dark age. Andrew, actually, that's a terrific title for a book or a presentation or a podcast. You guys will have to go back. This is good stuff. It is the digital dark age. The moment we've crossed into this, we've basically forfeited. I would say again, 99.9% of stuff will be gone. Or like it'll just be susceptible to being altered or stuff like that. But I just think it'll be completely lost. Like you won't be able to access it anymore. Can you imagine, if you have a photograph from 100 years ago, you look at it and it's like, okay, I understand. But can you imagine, like 100 years from now, you have like a CD or a thumb drive or something? I mean, it'd be crazy. So I think you're right on, Andrew, like this digital dark age. And I think there's a way I could bring that into a book. And I don't know how. I'd have to think about it a little bit, or if you guys have ideas, but I think that could be like a chapter of saying too, like school safety. Like everybody wants. So I did a tabletop activity in the superintendent class, and it was a power outage because there's so much active shooter stuff out there, and I want to do something different. So they don't know about it until they get to class, and they pick out, like, here's your role. You're a superintendent, you're the building in the ground person, you're a high school principal. So we do a power outage, and then one thing that shows up right away is I have some things. So the power's out and you can't access, all your computers are down. And suddenly a couple of the people be like, whoa, like we have up on everybody's computer, they can access the safety plan. They just click on it. Well, they can't now because it's down, or the cell phone stuff. And I said, it doesn't have to be a power outage. It could be ransomware, right? A virus hits and it knocks out the system for hours or days or weeks, or it's just done. It encodes and encrypts and corrupts it. And then what do you do? So that was a thing, like everyone said, oh, I would go on and I would get the class list for the class off of the system, and it'd be like, you can't access the system. The system's down. So, yeah, you realize how people have already offloaded, and then they'll kind of ease up and they'll say, well, it's unlikely to happen. I'm like, not really. It's more likely to happen now than it was to happen a year ago. Next year, it'll be probably 3 times more likely than this year. And I mean, it's just exponentially more likely that something is going to go wrong with a cascade effect of technology or electrical system, or a ablation effect with a satellite that hits another satellite and turns into a million pieces. And then it just is a cloud that becomes moving at 1,000 miles an hour and wiping out other satellites. And I mean, these are things that are actually written about. So obsolescence by design. Yeah. And it's like an information obsolescence by design. So it's really fascinating that you wrote that, because like in schools, you could go back and look at paper handbooks and paper things, and you could go back and get some kind of institutional knowledge kind of out of those things of how it was done. But if it's like all electronic and you don't, that's one thing I was telling the soups too. I said, you've got to have paper copies of at least one paper copy of, if this was your training on suicide prevention, right, that you gave out, like one copy of the PowerPoint, and it has to be filed, because digitally, if that gets wiped out, right? It's Homeless in America. Hey, buddy, it is good to see you here. I hope you are doing okay. I do follow your channel, and I know you have a lot of stuff you've been navigating. So, but appreciate you, buddy. We had a power outage here at the house. I mean, in the neighborhood, maybe 2 months ago, but it lasted 6 hours. So just out of the blue. So suddenly, you start to, and you get that 6 hour point, you start to think, okay, at what point does the refrigerator, you got to start questioning like what's in there and what's your, plan if stuff doesn't come back online. And so, but yeah, so I need to figure out like how to maximize and prioritize my resources, and at the same time, like I need to personally like just do the bucket filling, right, which is biking, largely. Not now, it's snowing, but it will snow, like we're entering the season, but to come out really strong and be like ready to go like this upcoming year. And there's also, I want to visit. Wisconsin is the most dense state for Indian effigy mounds, and we have a number around us, but we have a lot of effigy mounds within an hour that I've never seen. So like I want to do some of these things. Then if I was to write another book, or if I was to go back and to do presenting a little bit, like what would I do? What would be bucket filling? Because right now, again, the consulting is good and it's money, which is good, right? Especially the economy being what it is. But it's yeah. So let's see. There was a case, this is Andrew, years ago when the FBI had to rush to find a VCR at a pawn shop to see a serial killer's videos were. Oh my goodness. That's interesting. So, I was going through, and I didn't realize that in the Library of Congress, there are a number of photos from, like the 1860s through like 1900, 1910 that are faked. They're composites. I think one has General Grant, and then there's other ones with buildings and stuff like that. And they're just taken as accurate historical record, but they are clearly manipulated. Like you can see people's legs don't line up, and you can see like a building has been like moved. And like this was a thing where there would be these professionals working in these laboratories in 1880 to mash up these photos. And pretty crazy stuff. But the fact, if you go into like the Library of Congress, there are, and they tell you which ones, right? So I think there's something there with a really interesting chapter of deepfakes of saying, this has been around for a long time. It's just, we've had Photoshop, but now the fact that you can deepfake a voice and stuff, and you can do it so rapidly, and the implications and the liar's dividend, right? If you put a deepfake out there, it can cost someone a job or a career or that stuff. But I think that's really interesting. Yeah, never go full digital. So yeah, I know it's crazy. It's crazy stuff. Like like on our SUV, it'll say like has to have an upload of software. So you have to like, have in the driveway for 15 minutes while it's downloading and doing all of its stuff. And it's just kind of a weird thing of like, what could go wrong with that, right? So, all right. Well, I'm signing off tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central Time, Three Beards Podcast, and it's up in the community tab. I appreciate you guys. It's been good to get back. I have to save what I have left of a voice here. I can tell it it's going. And thankfully, all of this works. I bought this nice Shure microphone, and which I do like, but I've been using it in these this nice headset and stuff. But it'll be good. I like those guys, and it'll be a good show tomorrow. So, guys, I appreciate it, and I'll tell you what, I will we'll do something too, because when I was doing some of those case studies and things like the class stuff, and I kind of run it and say, "What do you guys think about that?" And that was helpful, some good feedback and good shaping. So, all right. I don't have any takeout music or anything like that, and I stopped my subscription to Storyblocks because for like $130 a year, I wasn't downloading that much of sound, to make sure that you're not getting any copyright stuff, and I didn't really need to do that anymore. So so I don't have my Storyblocks stuff. But once you download it, you own the rights forever. So I do have stuff I can recycle. But cool. Well, wishing everybody a happy, safe Thanksgiving, safe travels, and just it's weird to think we have like 5 weeks to Christmas. It's this time of year is just it seems like it goes like fast, and then January slows down, especially Wisconsin, because it gets very cold and people just turn out a lot. And you don't have it gets dark at 4 o'clock, but then things start to unwind, and spring hits right away in April, and it's good stuff. So I appreciate all you guys, and hopefully you'll pop in and show some support in the show tomorrow. I know those guys would appreciate it. And until then, have a good one. I'll see you. Thank you.